Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Disciples of Tomorrow. This week, we're going to be finishing off the war chapters. So, there's a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
chapters, a lot of good stuff in the topics that the church outlined for us. It's
Oh
going to
yeah.
be 53 through 63.
Lots of good
And
chapters.
how are you doing tonight, Joe?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Ready to get this huge section done.
Yep. Okay. Well, like normal, Joe, the expert, is going to give background about these chapters.
I appreciate the compliment, but I am no expert on this. So 53, and continuing onward, again, just gonna do brief stuff. There's a lot in these chapters, so we
Yep.
recommend definitely going and reading them. There also is some church Book of Mormon videos that they have put out, so maybe we'll put a link down below for that. But just briefly summed up, we have the stories of the 2,000 stripling warriors. We have the people of the Ammon. They made the covenant that they shall not pick up arms and take the life of
Yep.
another. They are tempted to break that covenant in order to help the Nephites out because they're having such a difficult time with the war. Helaman, Alma's son, tells them not to do that. That they would rather them keep the covenant than break it and have
Yeah.
them all fall. So their sons end up stepping forward. So these young men end up coming forward, and 2,000 of them end up joining the Nephite story. And they end up joining a city, and a group of Nephites, actual soldiers, and they end up having a stratagem in order to take over a city. There ends up being a huge fight, and they end up joining that fight and end up destroying the Lamanites. And they end up, because of their faith, not one soul is uh, killed of those 2,000, which is just insane. Uh, we follow their story again. They end up getting to another battle, and they all get wounded from in that one, but again, not a single one of them
Yep.
was killed. So we get to see this group of young men. There's just their faith is just so incredible that nothing they aren't being killed, which is amazing and probably amazing for their mothers and their fathers as well. Just like none of them are getting hurt. In this section, just kind of jumping around, we get a lot of letters being sent. The whole story of the 2,000 Stripling Warriors is a letter from Helaman to Moroni. There's the west front and the east front, and they're sending letters back and forth between each other. Helaman is on I think he's on the east front. I don't know, but he's on one of the fronts, and he's like, "Hey, we are struggling bad. We are running out of supplies. We don't have a lot of men to hold the land that we're taking back. It's a miracle that we have taken back any land, and we just need help." Moroni is also having a struggle in his part of the land as well. They are the government is not sending them soldiers. So they are losing men, and they're watching their enemies grow in number daily. Just these numerous hosts that they're like, we don't know how we can deal with these. This is insane.
Yeah.
So Moroni ends up sending a letter to Bahorin, who is the chief judge,
Yep.
and so he sends one letter. A city is attacked and taken over by Lamanites, and in his anger, he sends another letter to him, and he's like, "Bro, what's going on with you? Like, do I need to come back there and show you, teach you a lesson?" Prohorn ends up writing back and telling him that the whole government was taken over by kingmen, people who desire a king. And he's like, "Hey, I love that you're so righteous. Like, I need you to come back and help us out." Um, so Moroni obviously doesn't helps him out with that and puts him in the judgment seat again. There's a few letters in between Helaman and the King of the Lamanites and the King of the Lamanites and Moroni kind of exchanging prisoners, the desire to.
Yep.
But the Nephites on both fronts, without communicating with each other, at least there's no record of them communicating. Both are like, "Nah, we can get our prisoners back on our own," and they both do, which is just crazy. There are some amazing stories of like stratagems that they use in order to get cities
Sure.
back, which is like I can I wouldn't be able to think of any of this. This is amazing. So I'm a big fan of the war chapters and just hearing, especially when thinking with a spiritual hat on, like how does this apply to us, kind of thing. But pretty much summed up, a few people die at the very end. Chapter 63, the very last chapter of the Book of Helaman. We get unfortunately a few deaths. Helaman, son of Alma, he ends up
Yeah.
dying. Shiblon ends up passing away as well, who is another son of Alma, who the records transfer over to him. And Captain Moroni ends up dying after the
Yeah.
war ends, which is just in so much death, so much loss in these last little chapters between the Lamanites and the Nephites. I do like that I think it is 63, 62, one of them. I think it's 62. It does say that they, like, after this war, then Helaman ends up going out and teaching before he dies, which is
Yeah.
crazy. He goes out and teaches with his brethren, trying to build up the church again because they kind of became soldiers. Everyone became a soldier. But they start prospering again, they become rich, but they are not prideful. They know what just happened. They remember their God, which is amazing. But yeah, that's the end of the Book of Alma. Something I did want to touch on before we continue, though, that I
Yeah.
didn't say last time was that in our last episode, Alma ended up dying as well, which we saw Alma from the beginning to the end. Like we saw
Yeah.
his whole thing. So I just want to say that it was cool to get to see him
Yeah.
rise and then end up passing away. So anyway, that's kind of
Well,
the sum up of this
you
mess.
know what I'd say? Why could there have not been people with different names? All throughout the Book of Mormon, you get people with the same name. It's like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about Helaman or Lehi or Nephi? And it's like Moroni or it's just all a
Yeah.
joke.
I'm
But
actually currently working on I don't know how it will help with that, but with passing down the Book of Mormon, like prophet to prophet, I'm working on like a whole spreadsheet for that, and I'll make it like an artsy fartsy thing on that. So, but
were you named after Joseph in the Bible or Smith or anyone? Or
all of
just
them.
randomly?
I don't
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
Just
So your parents are part of the confusion.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yep. All of my siblings and our names are just come from baby books.
Oh,
No.
there you go. Nice and
Yep.
easy.
No. Okay. We're going to get into some of the topics. The first one is a really good one. Having faith in God helps me overcome fear. You were talking about the stripling warriors. Obviously, amazing examples of
Oh,
faith.
oh my gosh,
They
yes.
were, none of them were lost, but they were all wounded. We can definitely apply that to our own life. That
Mhm.
if we trust and have faith in God, we're going to have injuries. We're going to spiritually be hurt sometimes,
Yeah.
but the Lord's going to take care of us and make sure that we don't perish in the end and that He'll deliver us. But
Oh
it's
yeah.
also cool too uh, that their mothers taught them. They were like thinking, oh, yeah, we knew because of the examples of our wonderful mothers. Uh, we often people overlook, I think, what a good parental figure can do and how much it can shape not only the kind of person someone is, but also the faith, the spirituality of what impact a good parent can have.
Oh yeah. No, 100%. I was watching some BYU professors talk about these chapters at
Yep.
least a little bit, and they were talking about how one of them asked the question like, why are the fathers not like represented, or why are the fathers not talked about? And one of them mentioned that, when that people of Ammon were first coming about, when they first were converted, there was a huge fight and they laid on the ground and a bunch of them got slaughtered. A bunch of these men were just cut down. And he was like, I wonder if some of these young boys, their fathers were the ones that were cut down. So their mothers were like, hey, if you believe, you'll be okay, kind of thing, which I thought was an interesting thing because I've never thought about that before.
That
Like,
is interesting.
but I'm not saying that's true,
Yeah.
but it's an interesting thing to think about. Like, oh, the reason why I don't know, but yes, they do reference the mothers a lot, particularly in Alma 56, 47 towards the end of that, and 48. But basically, if they did not doubt, they would deliver them. God would deliver them, and we do not. And we do not doubt our mothers knew it, which is just a powerful thing because
Sure.
it doesn't say that they didn't doubt at all. They're like, we know that they knew it. Like they still had their own things to come to terms with, but they're like, they knew it for sure. And we are still building up to that, but we're going to rely on their faith.
Yeah. I also love this story because a lot of times mothers and women aren't mentioned often throughout the scriptures.
Oh,
But
yeah.
this is a great plug to be like, hey, like mothers are awesome. And so giving them their flowers for if it weren't for all of them, then none of this story would have came to pass and the kids might have been slaughtered. That all of these things could have been different because of if they hadn't been there or taught them faith.
Yeah, 100%. Um, with having fear in God helps me overcome fear. I think of the fear of like being in a fight like this. Like these are huge armies of adults. Like these are men that are basically have been in this war for a while now, and they've been hardened by it, and they're ready to fight both sides. And to be kind of just like I think of like a 15-year-old just being thrown into the middle of that
Yeah,
is kind of a terrifying thing. Um, and I think of Helaman as well. He was a religious man. He was a prophet basically. He was the son of Alma. There's no record of him going into fights and stuff like that. So the fact that he is leading this group of people to fight, like people who had never lifted up a sword and never been in a fight,
yeah,
is a terrifying thing. If I was in their shoes, I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready.
yeah. I
But
might go AWOL, but
I'll
uh,
stay in the back. You guys, I'll
yeah,
take up the rear, guys. But
cool. And
the
you had a verse too that you wanted to share from this
yeah,
section.
yes, let me look. Yes, Alma, it's in Alma 57:27.
Okay.
I'll just read the verse real quick. Now, this was their faith of these whom I have spoken. They were young and their minds were firm, and they did put their trust in God continually. So, just kind of a thing I kind of was thinking of with this, well, at least with when it was talking about the sons of Ammon, basically, was, or the stripling warriors, was how do we want it to be said of us, these same things? So, do we want it to be said of us that they are young and their minds are firm and they do put their trust in God to continually, which is a pretty good thing to be remembered for thousands of years later. Like they were
For
young,
sure.
but they trusted God. And I think that's something that we, because we're young, we maybe don't feel it very we're starting to feel it, but we're
Speak for yourself.
hmm, we we're young and we in our youth we should learn to trust in the Lord continually. So that's just kind of a little
Well said.
thought I had about these stripling warriors.
Love that.
Yeah,
That was a good section. Always a good reminder to have faith, listen to our moms, fear, not doubt, trust. Uh, this next topic is an interesting one. I want to get some of your thoughts on it. Following followers of Jesus Christ are not easily offended, which in
yeah.
our day and age, people get offended very easily. And speaking personally, it's easy to get offended. Uh, how can we avoid being offended?
I obviously it references in this that Horan. So am I saying yeah, Pahoran, which
Yeah,
Moroni wrote a letter to, and he said some real nasty things in there.
for sure.
He's like,
Pahoran could have been very mad.
"Oh yes," and I with this section, now there's some things that especially with church and stuff that it's kind of call out like, oh man, yeah, I need to be better about that. So I don't know if like what we can do particularly. I think we'll just keep a mindset of who we are trying to represent because the savior wouldn't be offended by things. I mean, he knows all now. But he just loved people so completely that it just wouldn't cross his mind. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. And we're all trying to be representatives of him. So
For sure.
Yeah. That's just kind of what comes to mind immediately, like immediate thoughts. What are some things that maybe you come to mind with you?
Yeah. What I think is just emotional, like it's a natural emotion of the natural man. Things happen, our feelings get hurt. I was telling Joe the other day of something that happened in my ward that I was annoyed with. And I was a little bit annoyed, and that's what I said. It's a natural thing that just happens because of the state that we're in. But a big part of this life is to switch those natural tendencies to listen to the spirit so that those become the natural tendencies rather than the natural man. And so making the choice not to be offended, an eternal perspective definitely helps understanding that no matter what someone says, unfortunate, people are sometimes dumb and they say things they shouldn't. And we can choose to let that affect our testimony or still uh, follow the Lord. I don't know if I
Yeah.
was talking about it here with you, maybe on the podcast. It all blurs together if I was with someone else. But uh, the in one of the general conference talks, a bishop told the family not to come back because they were
Mm,
sick and he was really rude. And they chose not to. Did we talk
the
about it last week?
I don't know if we talked about it, but the dad basically tells them
Yeah.
like to next week we're going to be at church. Like doesn't matter. Like or when we get better kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
It's a good
that's
story.
it's a great story because they have all these generations now that are grateful to their grandfather that decided they all went home saying I was never going to come back. But they thought, no, this is true. The bishop said, yes, don't come back, but we're going to come back because it's true.
Yeah. Well said. Something that you said at the beginning was something that I think about often, like from something that you taught me forever ago, but your character basically. And um and obviously we are building our characters here on Earth to
For
what we
sure.
want them to be and changing your internal like soul, how it reacts to things is not an easy process. And it
No.
takes lots of time to be able to be confronted with the situation and have that spiritual maturity to be able to like what just like what you're saying like hey people make mistakes it's okay and be able to like react like Behoren did like Moroni wrote a
Oh,
very
I would have been very upset.
oh my especially with what he was going through he's like I was just overthrown like you have no idea what you're talking about like no you're in a total you don't know what's happening here you can't say anything but instead he's like hey like there's people that are taking over like I love that you're still trying to keep the commandments I love that you're fighting for freedom like this is amazing like it's just a whole letter of compliments to Moroni which I think is amazing I
Yeah.
love this like the letter back and forth
It was
between those
funny.
two.
I had a experience like this. So maybe I wouldn't respond poorly. Maybe I'd do okay. But on my mission, one of the elders quorum presidents reached out to us and asked us to send a certain thing
Mhm.
to him every week about the efforts and things. And then we just didn't think, oh, let's also send it to the Relief Society president because he had asked. But we were on a ward council meeting or something, and she was like, sent us this thing. And she was like, why are you only sending? I'm just as much a part of this. Like, you don't trust the Relief Society president. And she was very upset. And we took a step back and we were like, okay, like, hey, we apologize. You're doing awesome. We'll start doing this. But like we could have been offended and she unfortunately was a little bit upset like most people
Yeah.
would be, but trying our best to mend the situations is going to help everyone in the long run keep their testimonies and have better relationships and unity
Oh,
with those around us.
yeah. Keeping an eternal perspective, I think, solves most problems in the
Yeah.
church, especially with being offended. It's like people get offended over like things that maybe, again, they just didn't understand the situation. People see about that much of like a whole situations and they react on that a little bit. So understanding that and doing our best to realize that, you know what, it's just a little dirt. It's not nothing big to be upset about.
Yeah.
Nope.
I Before we move on, going back to what you were talking about with what I've talked about with character before with you. That's uh, Jesus Christ, his character was perfect. And so that's just it. I feel like understanding that we can change our character, like you're talking about, gives us added strength and power because it helps us understand that one day we can have character like the Savior. It's not always going to be so hard to resist temptation.
Oh yes.
I personally don't think, I could be very wrong, but I think most of the time, President Nelson has a pretty easy time resisting most temptations. It's because his character has changed over time, where his spirit is more in control than his body. When it says stop, when it says do something, he says no. I'm going to do what the spirit wants.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's the exciting thing for us. For as hard as it is for me to say no to sin sometimes, one day as I continue to make the hard choice, it becomes easier. Just
Yeah.
like Jesus Christ, it wasn't hard for him to treat people nicely that treated him terribly because of his character. And it
Yeah.
was just natural because his spirit was winning out to the body.
Yeah. It's again, we always have that thing, especially after we do something wrong, like, oh, I'm an idiot. Why'd I do that?
Yep,
But as we continue to study the gospel, that I think comes closer and closer to that line where that sin happens, and then it
for sure.
crosses over to before. It's like, hey, that's stupid. Don't do that. Nope. Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's dumb. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not saying like that's for every sin, but
Oh yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
it could be very particular sins. Like, no, I know that that doesn't make me happy. This doesn't bring me joy. And then some other sin is like, start the process over again. Here we go.
Yep.
But
And hopefully we can get to the point where it's
for,
less about sins of commission and sins of omission, where we're
mhm,
not making mistakes constantly, but we're forgetting to do the things or help people that we know that we should, things like that, so that we're
yeah,
not hurting people, but we're just not helping as many people as we should.
yeah, I
That's
agree.
the real goal.
Yeah, well
Cool.
said.
Okay, don't get offended, especially by us two idiots. If we say something
Honestly,
wrong, because
I
I
worry about that
promise
so
you,
much.
we didn't mean it. Uh,
We're not smart enough to mean stuff.
yeah. I have a responsibility to lift those around me. Look at
Uh,
that. A perfect segue right at the end. And I didn't even
Yay!
realize it.
That's what we're trying to do is lift people.
Yeah. We can lift others, no matter the circumstance. We've been commanded, we've made covenants through baptism to do so.
Yeah,
I don't have too much with this section. You have a bunch,
yeah. I
and
have a
so I'm
few
gonna let
things.
you take the reins and I'll chime in as needed.
Yeah, I'm waiting for someone to comment on our videos. Like, can that annoying guy stop talking? Like, we want to hear the bald guy.
Yeah, that's my bad. I'll stop talking.
No, I just said the bald. Never mind.
Yeah,
Whatever.
I tried to beat you, but then you threw in bald guy at the end.
So, with this, I have responsibility to lift people around me. I immediately think of the verse, so chapter 56, verse 16, and end of 17. We see the 2,000 stripling warriors, these faithful young men, end up
Yeah,
joining these people who have basically fought, like they're sleeping on their swords, basically. They are fighting during the day, and at night they are staying up and they're making defenses ready for the next day, basically, which is
yep,
exhaust. It sounds so exhausting. I get tired just thinking about it. But at the beginning of verse 16, it says, "Yea, and they were depressed in body as well as in spirit." Um, yeah, I'll just read the whole verse. Why not? For they had fought valiantly by day and toiled by night to maintain their cities, and thus they had suffered great afflictions of every kind. And now they were determined to conquer in this place or die. Therefore, you may well suppose that this little force which I brought with me, yea, those sons of mine, gave them great hopes and much joy. So we don't know, because these stripling warriors, they didn't know what was awaiting them. Like they had no idea. So, and they come into this whole situation, this huge war that's way bigger than just them. And I mean, maybe they did know, I don't know. But
yeah,
I love that it says that these people that were depressed and just in body as well as in spirit, like they are just down and they are not having a good time. And at the very end, it says that these sons of mine gave them great hopes and much joy. So this 2,000, these young men end up like strengthening these adults and just giving them hope again. And I think that's a good example of this. I'll be just lift where you stand kind of thing. There's people all around us
Sure.
that are wanting to. Oh man, that reminds me of a thing I wrote down. Hold up. There's a quote that I've found that I just I love so much. Um, oh man, my chicken scratch. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded. And that's Ralph Waldo Emerson. So that's really why we're here, is to make other people breathe a little easier. Not because we get some reward out of it, but because it's the right thing to do, which is as selfless as it can be. It's like I want you to breathe easier today, just
Yeah.
just to make your day a little lighter. Even if it's taxing on me. Like that's what we're supposed to do, which I think that this obviously these 2000 something warriors bring that in very well. Um, there's a few other verses that I have.
Uh,
For, oh, yeah,
Before you go,
yeah. No, go ahead.
makes me think of uh, Doctrine and Covenants 18. I think it's about verse 15 or so, but it talks about how great your joy is if
You
you
bring
bring
one.
human soul, and or if you have many, how imagine how great it is. But then also what you're saying too about even if it's taxing, and sometimes it will be.
Oh
Think
yeah.
of Jesus Christ and the story of John the Baptist had just been beheaded, and he's basically mourning for his cousin. And then I can't remember exactly what he's asked to do, but he forgets himself and he goes back to help uh, someone who is in
Oh,
need
there.
because it, and even though he was in a bad place at the time, he thought, okay, I'm going to put my things aside and I'm going to help, even though I'm going to. Or in the Character of Christ talk by
Oh, I was just about to reference.
Elder
Yes,
Bednar, he talks about a woman that had just lost her daughter. And then someone called and was like, hey, where
complains
are my
about yeah.
dinners? Like, bring me my dinners. And she, for one, chose not to be offended. And two, she chose to say, hey, I apologize. We'll get on that. Even
And
though she was in a hard place. The amount of Christ-like character that takes is just amazing.
that video is
But
the best ever.
it really
Ah,
is. But just think of like that really does embody Christ.
yeah.
It's in the moments that are the hardest, it's still staying who we are. It's a lot easier to serve when we're feeling great and doing great. But when we're not in a great place, waking up and thinking of others is amazing. But I'll let you continue now.
No, I just what I should have done these two verses before I did those. Um, this sorry, chapter 53, verse 15. There's a line that sell. Sorry, I'll just read the whole verse. I don't know why I read sections. And human feared least by doing they should lose their souls. Therefore, all those who had entered in this covenant were compelled to behold their brethren wade through their afflictions in their dangerous circumstances at this time. So I spiritual one-liner basically. It's like how
Yeah.
often do we like there's nothing we can physically do. We just have to watch these people, the people that we love, wade through their afflictions and obviously Google search what the definitions wade walk with an effort through water or another liquid or a viscous I don't know substance.
Hmm.
That obviously
Interesting
is
definition.
having a thick or sticky consistency between solid and liquid,
Hmm.
which doesn't sound fun to wade through.
Yep.
But sometimes we have to just watch. There's nothing we could do but encourage and try to help out. Like these people, obviously, they gave food to the Nephites, and eventually they were called on to give their sons to the Nephites into the war. So it's gonna maybe at the time we don't have anything to give, but maybe we do like later down the road. And then I had another thing in chapter again 56. I should have read these first. My bad. 56, verse 12. And the Lamanites had also retained many prisoners, all of whom were chief captains. So I think that there's many. We are always told here in the latter days, we are all chief captains of the Savior's army. We were saved for this day, and we were brought here to this time to serve and to stand firm in what we believe and in our testimonies. I think there's many of us that know chief captains that have been taken prisoner by our enemy, and obviously we can't mount a rescue for them. Sometimes all we can do is watch them wade through their afflictions and just be there when they need us, if that makes sense. So
Oh
that's just
yeah,
that's just kind of thoughts that came to me this go round for that topic. I love that topic, just being standing for someone, even if it's like takes a bit of you, like
oh yeah.
giving.
I love that. It's sometimes, most of the time, harder to watch others struggle with their afflictions and their trials than it
Oh
is to go through them yourself, especially someone you're close with. It's
yeah,
no fun. And so doing our best to lift them how we can. A lot of times we can't do much, but a
uh,
loving ear and a friend, it does go a long way,
yeah. I think
knowing that you're cared about.
Yeah. I don't think there's a better time to be an acting of the Savior or know how a Savior feels than when we want so desperately for us just to be able to take the pain away from someone and be like, no, I'll deal with this. I'll take this for you. Like
Yep,
that's how the Savior feels for all of us. Like he's like, I just want to take it away. Like let me do that. So yeah,
I agree.
yeah,
Oh, lift where you can and help where you can. The last section, if I am humble, life's challenges can turn my heart to God. I want to read in chapter 62, verse 41. Maybe turn to it. Okay. Uh, But behold, because of their exceedingly great length of war between the Nephites and the Lamanites, many had become hardened because of the exceedingly great length of war, and many were softened because of their afflictions, inasmuch as they did humble themselves before God, even in the depths of humility.
yeah,
So just like going back to the offended conversation, we have a choice. We can choose how we respond, whether we let our trials shape us to be softened and have soft hearts to listen to the word of the Lord, or to be angered and annoyed, things like that. I think I've told Joe about this, but I think you see that a lot with old people. It's harder to tell at our age just because there's a lot going on and most people are still optimistic. But I feel like you learn throughout life. You see two types of old people most of the time. You see people that are really grumpy and that have let their pain and their hard times annoy them and harden them. And then you have the ones that are in just as much pain and have just as many problems, but they're always happy and kind. And those are the people that have decided, no, it's okay. Like life is better when I respond to these trials in this way rather than the
yeah.
other.
Oh, 100%. I wanted to read a section of From the Come Follow Me really
Yeah.
quickly. And I think this sums up that pretty well. Put a raw egg and a potato in boiling water
Yeah.
and to help you think about how you can choose to either softened or hardened by your trials. And yeah, so basically it has a whole stuff in there. Anyway, hard-boiled egg and a potato, you put them in the same boiling water. One, the hard-boiled egg obviously gets hard. It's not a liquid anymore.
Yep.
And the potato becomes soft. You're able to squish it in your hands. It's
Eat
very
it.
yeah. So basically, the same trial can do either make you hard-hearted or it can soften you. So just the same thing you're saying, and that's a good thing to like. That's wise. Look to your elders
That's
for
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's I never thought about that before, but that makes a lot of sense.
Oh,
Hmm.
sure. Well, so what do we do? How do we respond correctly? Is it just the same as offended? Is it just a choice? How do we do it?
I think it also. I think again. I think it's a choice on who we want to be. I think it's all keeping the Eternals perspective and remember the person that you like, the representative you want to be. Do you want to be someone that's hardened by life, or do you want to be someone that's, finds joy, but also deals with afflictions and finds joy through your afflictions because that's where you're going to meet your savior in your afflictions. In your trials, that's where he's going to be. He's going to rescue you from them. So the best place to walk with him is to stand stand tall and true in those, because I'm just saying, if the savior's going to walk up to me, I don't want to be just like, just covered in mud. I'm gonna be standing trying to wade through something, even if it's gross and nasty. But I don't know. That's just my idea.
Oh
But
yeah, I love that. This these sections are a lot about making choices every day, using our agency to respond correctly to the things that happen in our life, other people's use of agency, all of that. Uh, you want to give your closing thought?
yeah, I love the war chapters. I'm honestly really sad they're over. I have so many thoughts I wish I could share. I could talk for hours about the war chapters. They're so great. But obviously we don't have the time for that. I guess the things that come to mind, like the what's the point kind of thing, is that we can have faith just like these Nephites did. We can deal with our trials just like we said previously. We can let it harden us or
Yeah,
let us let it soften us. And obviously that's a daily choice. And I'm trying to make it a softened thing, but it's a learning thing. Changing a soul is it's a long thing. So I'm gonna be doing my best on that end. But what are some thoughts you have on this?
I love that. I want to go back to the first section about having faith and not doubting, because obviously those are opposites, and so we can't have one with the other. Makes me think of the Life of Thomas S. Monson video. There's a story of a little girl that had cancer, and he was coming to speak in their conference, and then they found out that when he was coming, he didn't have time to come about the hour drive to their house. Uh,
Mhm.
and her parents were all frazzled, and the little girl prayed and said, "He's coming, guys. Why are you worrying? He's coming to our
Oh,
house."
that's such baby.
And President no, I mean President Monson said it was one of the most spiritual moments in his entire life. This section made me think of that verse that you read too, about uh, they were young, uh, but I think becoming as a little child and having faith like one,
Oh,
because
for
it's not faith, it's pretty much knowledge. They know that Jesus Christ is there for them, whatever they're going through, whether or not he decides to save them or to help them in that moment, they trust.
yeah,
And so let's become like little children and uh, trust in whatever he has planned for us.
agreed. Well said.
Cool. Well, another great week. I am not like Joe. I'm kind of thankful the war chapters are over. But
A
next week we're going to be talking about Helaman 1 through 6. So it's going to be some
little
good stuff.
smaller.
And yep, a little bit smaller. And we're hoping that you will all join us next week. Thanks for joining this week.
Yeah, if you have any comments and want to share your thoughts on the war chapters, put them down below. We love to hear from you. And like the video and maybe subscribe, share it with your friends. That'd be awesome. And we will see you guys next time.
Okay, see ya. See ya,
Bye.
Joe.